Art is never finished, only abandoned. Like me, you've probably heard this quote a bunch of different times throughout life, maybe in the context of creating music, maybe in the context of painting a painting or filming and editing a video. And yeah, this quote is probably a bit of a cliche at this point, but every time I find myself being close to finishing some creative project, I find this playing back in my head over and over again as I'm tweaking, trying to get it just right. Like if you're a musician or producer like me recording music and you're just sitting there, no matter how many times you play the part or how many times you tweak the EQ and compression, it's just always a little off from what you think it could be. To make matters worse, like even if you do fix something and get it just right, along the way while you were listening, you identify 2 more problems for every problem that you do fix. So it makes the idea of being finished and perfection further and further away. And perfectionism is bad, so don't be like me. But even with that in mind, I think the fair question that I've been asking myself is, if I know this song isn't going to be perfect and I'm not gonna get everything right, when can I abandon the song? Am I just waiting for some arbitrary day where I get so frustrated with something, or I'm just so sick and tired of listening to my own song that I go, okay, it's done, let's release it? Or do I have some realistic targets and ideas in my head of where am I going, where do I wanna be when I put this out so that at least I'm really content with it? So from that, I came up with these 5 guidelines for myself to let me know when can I give up on my own music.
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not.
First up is the easiest one, but I also think it's the most important thing to be asking yourself, not only when you're getting close to finishing, but also while you're creating a song. And that's to ask yourself, is this a song that you want to listen to? Like, no joke, sometimes I'll get into writing a song and I'm like just focusing on getting it done, like writing the verses, writing like a bridge part. And I kind of get to me and I'm like, okay, I'm getting close to finished with it, but I'm really thinking like, I don't think I'd even want to hear this song. And I think for almost all of us, our best guide is just gonna be ourselves. Like, are we creating art other people want to hear? If we don't want to hear it ourselves, probably not. Now, that doesn't mean you gotta throw it away and abandon it. It just might mean it needs some tweaking, and that could be in the music department, could be in the lyrics department. Obviously, there are a ton of specific questions you could ask yourself to help you kind of massage a song into the song that it needs to be. Next up is something that I've only started adopting very recently, but as I've been working on a collection of songs I want to put out as singles and eventually an album, this has been like my main guide to know, is this at a point I'd be happy with? And that is to pick a point of reference, something existing that's going to be your baseline for quality. Honestly, with myself on this album, I know I'm not gonna be able to produce like an album at the level of like a Taylor Swift or at the level of Bruno Mars. But there are albums out there that I think I have the chops to produce nearly at that level. So what I've done for myself with these singles is I actually picked out Ed Sheeran's Plus album as my point of reference because I think it's a great album, but I also don't think it's like the most pristine, greatest produced album in the world, throwing no shade at them, but I think it's something that's a little more attainable. So when I'm asking myself like, is this good enough? Is this quality? I listen to one of my songs and then I go flip over to Plus and I'm like, okay, am I hitting roughly in that area? And if I am, that's a really good guide for me because when I'm listening to a song over and over and over again, it can be really hard to determine for yourself, like, is what I'm hearing good? And that might sound really silly if you've never written or produced a song, but I promise you, when you've written something and produced it, you've heard it literally hundreds and hundreds of times, and you just mentally lose the concept of like, is this good? Because I don't know. Number 3, everyone out there who has ever played a Dark Souls game or an Elden Ring or any game that's just really hard is gonna understand this. And that is that after you get to a certain point, you need to take some time away from your track. If you don't know, there's this shared experience amongst people who have played Dark Souls games where you play a boss over and over and over again and you just lose. You just keep dying. And after so long, you just have gotten progressively worse at it. And you just have this feeling like this is impossible. I can't do it. So you throw your hands up in the air. You're like, I'm gonna go grab some food. You grab some food, you sit back down, you're like, okay, I'm gonna give it another shot. And with yourself collected and not carrying the burden of everything that was already in your head, you just beat the boss the first time, and it's not that hard. And when you're working on a track and you get so deep in it, I think the same effect applies, where you've heard it so much and you're carrying all these thoughts about every instrument's mix and all the effects you've applied for each that it gets really hard to listen to the track just as a whole, as one piece. And that's really what most people are gonna be hearing when they listen to your track. A lot of people Don't listen to music and pick out every instrument that specifically like we do. Many times in my life, I've gotten off stage after playing bass and someone has said, "You sounded great on the guitar." Or I was playing keyboard and playing synthesizer and they were like, "I loved how you play the piano." Well, there was no piano in there. So it's really important to have an ear for the specifics and also to have an ear for the whole sound of the music. And I think taking a step away is just a great way to get that. Number 4 and 5 are super similar, but let's start with number 4. Obviously, that's to find someone in your life at your level or ideally even a little better than you to give it a listen and give you feedback. What I do on a lot of my tracks is I find people that are better at specific things. So, for example, on my new track coming out soon, My Little Catherine, I was not sure about the drums because I'm not much of a drummer. So I sent the track over to a buddy of mine who plays drums and I was like, "Hey, can you just let me know what you think? Do you have any ideas? Does this even sound good?" And he's given me some feedback and I've adjusted the drums based on that. You can do the same thing on your tracks for individual instruments or parts, or for the track as a whole if you know someone who's like a great producer in your life and they can give you that feedback. They're probably gonna come at everything from a very different perspective than you. Even if you're into the same stuff and same music, you just have a certain perspective when you've created a song that you will not be able to not have. Double negatives, good. And to wrap it up, number 5 is the exact opposite of number 4. And that is to send your track to someone who's not knowledgeable. Honestly, some of the best feedback I've ever gotten on songs has come from people who aren't technical. Technical people are great and can give you amazing feedback and sometimes super specific, like, "Hey, that chord voicing isn't very good, you should try this voicing," or "The rhythm here doesn't really match with what you're singing, so maybe try doing this." But someone who's not technical is gonna give you feedback like, "I don't like the energy of how you sang that." That's really good feedback. A friend actually gave me that feedback on a specific verse recently. She didn't like how I sang it. That's really helpful because when I heard it, I was like, yeah, it's technically correct, but it doesn't have the right energy for the song. So I'm gonna go back and re-record that because of that feedback. Both are great. Technical feedback can be incredible and helpful and super specific, but for people that aren't technical and aren't that into music, they're gonna listen to your music like probably a lot of your audience and people you're looking for to hear your songs. They're gonna listen to it like that. And sometimes that can be the most valuable. And speaking of super valuable, you're super valuable. So you should get subscribed and swing that to the comments and let me know if you have any more tips or guidelines that you use as benchmarks to know when your songs are done. Thank you so much. See you next time.